Welcome back to Drowsy Tales Daily. Tonight I have 35 incredible stories from Reddit about family members who let greed completely override their love and loyalty, leading to shocking betrayals that destroyed relationships and exposed the worst sides of human nature when inheritance and money are involved. Our first story comes from a family that discovered their sister had been hiding their grandmother's updated will for over 2 years while allowing the family to believe an outdated version would distribute the estate. The sister worked as a home health aide and had been caring for their grandmother during her final years, giving her access to important documents and financial information that other family members didn't have. When the grandmother became concerned about her estate distribution and decided to update her will to reflect changes in family circumstances and relationships, she confided in this sister about the modifications and asked her to ensure the new will reach the appropriate attorney. However, instead of following through with the grandmother's wishes, the sister realized the updated will would significantly reduce her own inheritance while increasing distributions to other family members who had maintained closer relationships with their grandmother over the years. The sister decided to hide the new will and destroy all evidence of its existence, allowing the family to proceed with estate distribution based on an outdated will that gave her a much larger inheritance share. She had carefully removed the updated will from the grandmother's important papers and had even convinced the grandmother that the legal paperwork had been properly filed when it had actually been hidden in the sister's personal safe. The hidden will scheme was discovered when the family attorney mentioned receiving a call from the grandmother about will modifications that no one else knew about, leading to a thorough search of the grandmother's belongings that eventually revealed the sister had been hiding the updated legal document that would have completely changed the estate distribution according to their grandmother's final wishes. Our second story involves an uncle who was systematically manipulating his elderly aunt's bank accounts and financial affairs while serving as her primary caregiver and financial power of attorney. The uncle had convinced his aunt that he needed access to her banking information to help manage her daily expenses and medical bills, but had been gradually transferring money from her accounts into his own finances while creating false documentation to justify the transfers. The bank account manipulation scheme involved making small, regular withdrawals that would appear to be legitimate expenses for groceries, medications, and household needs, while actually using the money for personal purchases and debt payments that had nothing to do with his aunt's care. The uncle had been particularly careful to time his withdrawals to coincide with his aunt's Social Security deposits and pension payments, ensuring that her account balances would appear normal during her occasional balance checks. The scheme extended to manipulating her bill payment system and creating fake invoices for services that were never provided, including inflated costs for home maintenance, medical equipment, and even grocery delivery services that existed only on paper. The uncle had also been intercepting her bank statements and financial correspondence, replacing them with falsified documents that showed lower account balances and higher expense amounts to prevent his aunt from discovering the systematic theft. The financial manipulation was discovered when the aunt's neighbor, who occasionally helped with errands, noticed that the aunt was running out of money for basic necessities despite having substantial retirement savings, leading to investigation of her financial records that revealed months of unauthorized transfers and fraudulent expense claims that had drained thousands of dollars from her accounts. Our third story comes from a family that discovered their stepmother had stolen their deceased father's life insurance benefits by forging beneficiary change forms and manipulating the insurance claim process. The stepmother had been married to their father for only 3 years before his unexpected death from a heart attack, but had quickly taken control of all funeral arrangements and estate management processes before other family members could fully understand the financial implications. The life insurance theft scheme involved submitting forged documents to the insurance company that showed the stepmother as the sole beneficiary of a substantial life insurance policy that had originally named the children from his first marriage as primary beneficiaries. The stepmother had accessed the father's personal files and had created convincing forgeries of beneficiary change forms that appeared to have been signed shortly before his death, making it seem like he had made last-minute changes to his insurance benefits. She had also manipulated the death certificate filing process and funeral arrangements to ensure that she would be the primary contact for all insurance and financial matters, preventing other family members from learning about the policy details until after the fraudulent claim had been processed and paid. The stepmother had been careful to present herself as the grieving widow who was overwhelmed by financial responsibilities. gaining sympathy from insurance representatives who processed her claim without thorough verification of the beneficiary change documentation. The life insurance fraud was discovered when the children were reviewing their father's personal papers and found copies of the original insurance policy showing them as beneficiaries, along with correspondence from the insurance company that indicated no legitimate beneficiary changes had been filed before their father's death, leading to investigation that revealed the forged documents and fraudulent claim processing. Our fourth story involves a brother who was systematically forging property deed signatures and legal documents to transfer ownership of family real estate into his personal name without the knowledge or consent of other family members who held joint ownership rights. The brother worked in the real estate industry and had detailed knowledge of property transfer procedures and legal documentation requirements, which he used to create convincing forgeries of signatures from family members who were supposed to be consulted about any property transactions. The property deed forgery scheme involved accessing original deed documents from county records and creating falsified signature pages that would make it appear that all required family members had agreed to transfer their ownership interests to him exclusively. The brother had been particularly focused on a family vacation property that had been jointly inherited from their grandparents, and had been pressuring other family members to sell the property while secretly working to gain sole ownership through fraudulent legal documentation. The scheme extended to creating fake notarization documents and even bribing a corrupt notary public to provide official stamps and seals on forged signature pages, making the fraudulent property transfers appear completely legitimate to county recording offices. The brother had also been manipulating property tax payments and maintenance responsibilities, claiming exclusive ownership rights while preventing other family members from accessing the property or participating in decisions about its use and maintenance. The deed forgery operation was discovered when one of the family members attempted to refinance their portion of the property and learned from the county clerk that ownership had been transferred exclusively to their brother through documents they had never signed, leading to investigation of the property records and notarization verification that revealed systematic forgery designed to steal family real estate through fraudulent legal documentation. Our fifth story comes from a family that discovered their cousin had been secretly selling valuable family heirlooms and antique collections that were being stored in their home, while other family members believed the items were being preserved for future generations. The cousin had inherited the responsibility of maintaining their grandfather's collection of antique furniture, vintage artwork, and valuable collectibles after his death, with the understanding that these items would eventually be distributed among all grandchildren according to provisions in his will. However, instead of preserving the collection as intended, the cousin had been gradually selling the most valuable pieces through online auctions and antique dealers while creating elaborate stories about items being damaged, lost, or stolen to explain their disappearance. The heirloom selling scheme involved researching the value of individual pieces and systematically removing the most expensive items first, while keeping lower value pieces visible to maintain the appearance that the collection was still intact and properly maintained. The cousin had been particularly careful to sell items through out-of-state dealers and online platforms that would make it difficult for other family members to accidentally discover the missing pieces in local antique shops or auction houses. The scheme extended to creating fake insurance claims for supposedly stolen or damaged items, allowing the cousin to collect insurance payments in addition to the proceeds from secret sales while providing believable explanations for why valuable pieces were no longer in the collection. The cousin had also been manipulating the inventory records and collection documentation, removing references to sold items, and creating false records that would support their claims about theft and damage. The secret selling operation was discovered when another family member happened to see one of their grandfather's distinctive antique pieces in an online auction listing, leading to investigation of the collection inventory that revealed dozens of valuable items had been sold without family knowledge or consent over a period of several years. Our sixth story involves a mother-in-law who was systematically emptying joint savings accounts and investment funds that she shared with her deceased son, transferring money that was supposed to be preserved for her grandchildren's education and future needs. The mother-in-law had been granted access to these accounts to help manage household expenses during her son's final illness, but had continued accessing the funds after his death while his widow was dealing with grief and funeral arrangements. The joint account theft scheme involved making large withdrawals and investment liquidations that depleted accounts that had been specifically designated for the grandchildren's college education and future financial security. The mother-in-law had been careful to time her withdrawals to coincide with periods when her daughter-in-law was too overwhelmed with grief and childcare responsibilities to monitor financial accounts closely, taking advantage of the family crisis to steal money that was meant to support the children's future. The scheme extended to manipulating account access codes and contact information, ensuring that account statements and transaction notifications would be directed to her address rather than to the widow who should have been monitoring the family's financial situation. The mother-in-law had also been creating false explanations for the missing funds, claiming that her son had authorized withdrawals for various family expenses and debt payments that had never actually been discussed or approved. The joint account theft was discovered when the widow attempted to access the children's college fund accounts and learned that they had been completely emptied, leading to investigation of transaction records that revealed systematic theft of funds that were supposed to be protected for the grandchildren's future education and financial security. Our seventh story comes from a family that discovered their nephew had been stealing their grandfather's. The nephew had developed relationships with illegal drug dealers who would purchase stolen prescription medications for resale, creating a profitable operation that generated substantial cash income while potentially endangering his grandfather's health and medical treatment. The scheme extended to manipulating pharmacy pickup schedules and prescription refill timing, ensuring that medication shortages wouldn't be discovered until the nephew had opportunities to create believable explanations for missing pills. The nephew had also been intercepting communications from doctors and pharmacists about medication compliance and effectiveness, preventing medical professionals from learning that his grandfather wasn't receiving proper medication dosages due to the ongoing theft. The prescription medication theft was discovered when the grandfather's health began deteriorating despite supposedly taking all prescribed medications correctly, leading to medical evaluation that revealed therapeutic drug levels were far below expected ranges, ultimately exposing the systematic theft of essential medications that were being sold for profit while endangering an elderly family member's health and medical treatment. Our eighth story involves a sister-in-law who was claiming false power of attorney authority over her deceased husband's estate and using forged legal documents to control family assets and financial decisions that should have involved other family members. The sister-in-law had been married to the family member for only a short period before his unexpected death, but had quickly asserted control over all estate matters by claiming she held comprehensive power of attorney that gave her exclusive authority over financial and legal decisions. However, investigation revealed that the power of attorney documents she was using were either completely forged or had been obtained through deception and manipulation of her husband when he was not mentally capable of understanding the legal implications of the documents he was signing. The false power of attorney scheme involved presenting fraudulent legal documentation to banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions to gain access to accounts and assets that should have been distributed according to proper estate procedures involving all legitimate heirs. The sister-in-law had been particularly focused on accessing life insurance benefits, retirement accounts, and valuable personal property while preventing other family members from participating in estate administration or challenging her claimed authority. The scheme extended to manipulating funeral arrangements and estate settlement procedures, using her supposed legal authority to make decisions that primarily benefited her financial interests while excluding family members who should have been involved in important decisions about their deceased relatives' final arrangements and asset distribution. The sister-in-law had also been creating false documentation about debts and expenses that supposedly needed to be paid from estate funds, essentially stealing money while claiming the funds were needed for legitimate estate administration costs. The false power of attorney fraud was discovered when legitimate family members consulted with an estate attorney who verified that the power of attorney documents being used were not properly executed and may have been obtained through elder abuse or outright forgery, leading to legal action to challenge the fraudulent authority and protect family assets from continued theft. Our ninth story comes from a family that discovered their uncle had been systematically redirecting their elderly relative's Social Security payments and government benefits into his personal bank account while claiming to provide caregiving services that justified his access to financial information. The uncle had convinced his elderly aunt that consolidating her government benefits into a single account would simplify her financial management and reduce confusion about multiple payment sources, but had actually been routing her Social Security and pension payments into an account he controlled exclusively. The Social Security redirection scheme involved submitting false change of address forms and bank account information to government agencies, making it appear that his aunt had requested the payment changes while she was actually unaware that her benefits were being stolen. The uncle had been careful to provide his aunt with small amounts of cash for daily expenses while keeping the majority of her government benefits for personal use, maintaining the illusion that she was still receiving her full benefit payments. The scheme extended to intercepting government correspondence and benefit statements, preventing his aunt from learning about the payment redirections while creating false documentation that would support his claims about providing comprehensive caregiving services. The uncle had also been manipulating his aunt's understanding of her financial situation, convincing her that her benefit amounts had been reduced due to government policy changes rather than admitting that he was stealing her money systematically. The Social Security theft operation was discovered when a social worker conducting a routine check on elderly benefit recipients noticed that the aunt appeared to have very limited income despite receiving substantial Social Security and pension benefits, leading to investigation of payment records that revealed the unauthorized redirection of government benefits to accounts controlled by the uncle, who was supposed to be providing care rather than stealing from the vulnerable elderly family member. Our 10th story involves a stepfather who was attempting to sell the family home without permission or legal authority while his elderly wife was hospitalized for extended medical treatment. The stepfather had been married to the woman for less than 5 years and had no legal ownership interest in the property, which had been in her family for generations and was supposed to be preserved for her children from a previous marriage. However, he had been working with corrupt real estate agents and legal document preparers to create fraudulent sale documentation that would allow him to profit from the property sale while his wife was unable to monitor or prevent his actions. The unauthorized home sale scheme involved forging his wife's signature on listing agreements and sale contracts while claiming that she had given him verbal permission to handle the transaction due to her medical condition and inability to manage the paperwork herself. The stepfather had been particularly focused on completing the sale quickly before his wife recovered enough to discover his actions, and had been working with buyers who were willing to complete transactions with questionable documentation in exchange for below-market pricing. The scheme extended to manipulating his wife's medical information and recovery timeline, providing false updates to family members about her condition to prevent them from visiting or discovering his plans to sell their family property without authorization. The stepfather had also been intercepting mail and legal correspondence related to the property, ensuring that other family members wouldn't learn about the proposed sale until after it had been completed and the proceeds had been transferred to accounts he controlled. The fraudulent property sale was discovered when one of the adult children decided to visit their mother's home to check on maintenance needs and found real estate signs and strange cars in the driveway, leading to investigation that revealed the stepfather was attempting to steal and sell property that he had no legal right to control or transfer. Our 11th story comes from a family that discovered their daughter had been systematically stealing their deceased mother's valuable jewelry collection and selling pieces through online auctions and local jewelry dealers without informing other family members who were supposed to inherit portions of the collection. The daughter had been given temporary custody of the jewelry during estate settlement proceedings, with the understanding that the collection would be appraised and distributed according to their mother's will, which specified that various pieces should go to different family members based on personal relationships and sentimental value. However, instead of preserving the collection for proper distribution, the daughter had been researching the value of individual pieces and selling the most expensive items while keeping detailed records to ensure she could maximize profits from the theft. The jewelry theft scheme involved gradually removing valuable pieces from the collection and replacing them with similar-looking but worthless costume jewelry, hoping that other family members wouldn't notice the substitutions until after estate distribution had been completed. The daughter had been particularly focused on selling pieces that other family members were unlikely to examine closely, including items that were stored in jewelry boxes rather than regularly worn or displayed. The scheme extended to manipulating the estate appraisal process and providing false information about the collection's contents to ensure that missing pieces wouldn't be discovered during official valuation procedures. The daughter had also been creating false stories about pieces being lost or damaged to explain disappearances that might be noticed by family members who had specific memories of particular jewelry items. The jewelry collection theft was discovered when a family member recognized one of their mother's distinctive antique brooches in an online auction listing, leading to investigation of recent sales and collection inventory that revealed systematic theft of valuable pieces that were supposed to be distributed among family members according to their mother's specific wishes expressed in her will. Our 12th story involves a brother-in-law who was manipulating trust fund distributions and investment account management to redirect money that was designated for his deceased wife's children into his personal financial accounts. The brother-in-law had been appointed as trustee for educational and support funds that were established to provide for his stepchildren's future needs, but had been systematically violating the trust terms and stealing money that was supposed to be preserved for the children's education and living expenses. The trust fund manipulation scheme involved creating false documentation about educational expenses and living costs that supposedly justified distributions from the trust accounts, while actually using the money for personal debts and luxury purchases that had nothing to do with the children's welfare. The brother-in-law had been particularly careful to create believable expense reports and receipts for educational materials, tutoring services, and children's activities that appeared legitimate but were actually fabricated to justify unauthorized trust fund withdrawals. The scheme extended to manipulating investment strategies and account management decisions, redirecting trust fund growth and income into accounts he controlled rather than preserving capital for the children's future financial security. The brother-in-law had also been intercepting trust fund statements and financial reports, preventing the children and other family members from monitoring the trust fund performance and discovering the systematic theft of designated funds. The trust fund theft operation was discovered when the children reached ages where they were supposed to receive specific distributions for college expenses, only to learn that the trust funds had been depleted through unauthorized distributions that were documented with false expense reports and fraudulent justifications for expenditures that had never actually benefited the intended beneficiaries. Our 13th story comes from a family that discovered their cousin had been systematically forging their elderly relative's signature on checks and using her bank account for personal expenses while claiming to provide caregiving and financial management services. The cousin had volunteered to help manage banking and bill payment responsibilities after their elderly aunt began experiencing difficulty with financial tasks and memory issues that made independent money management challenging. However, instead of providing legitimate assistance, the cousin had been writing checks to herself and forging her aunt's signature on withdrawal slips and financial documents to access money for personal use. The check forgery scheme involved studying her aunt's signature patterns and practicing forgery techniques to create convincing false signatures that would pass casual inspection by bank tellers and automated processing systems. The cousin had been careful to forge checks for amounts that wouldn't trigger additional verification requirements while systematically draining the account through frequent small withdrawals over extended periods. The scheme extended to manipulating her aunt's understanding of her financial situation and creating false explanations for missing money, convincing the elderly woman that she had authorized various payments and purchases that had actually been forged transactions. The cousin had also been intercepting bank statements and financial correspondence, replacing them with falsified documents that showed smaller withdrawals and higher account balances to prevent her aunt from discovering the ongoing theft. The check forgery operation was discovered when a bank teller noticed suspicious signature variations on several recent checks and contacted the account holder directly to verify the transactions, leading to investigation that revealed systematic forgery and theft that had been depleting the elderly woman's savings for over a year while she trusted her cousin to provide honest financial assistance. Our 14th story involves a sister who was illegally selling family business shares and ownership interests that she had inherited jointly with other family members, violating partnership agreements and legal restrictions on ownership transfers. The sister held a minority ownership stake in a family business that had been passed down through generations, with specific legal agreements that required unanimous consent from all family owners before any shares could be sold or transferred to outside parties. However, The sister had been struggling with personal financial problems and had decided to sell her ownership interest without informing other family members or obtaining the required legal approvals for the transaction. The illegal share sale scheme involved working with corrupt business brokers and legal document preparers who helped create fraudulent sale documentation that made it appear she had obtained proper family consent for the ownership transfer. The sister had been particularly focused on finding buyers who were willing to complete transactions with questionable legal documentation in exchange for below-market pricing that would allow her to access quick cash while avoiding the lengthy approval process required by family partnership agreements. The scheme extended to falsifying family meeting minutes and consent documents, creating fake records that would support her claims that other family members had approved the sale when no such discussions or approvals had actually occurred. The sister had also been manipulating business financial records and partnership documentation, attempting to make her ownership stake appear more valuable and independent than it actually was under the terms of the family business agreements. The illegal share sale was discovered when the buyer attempted to register their ownership interest with business regulatory agencies and encountered legal problems due to the lack of proper family consent and violation of partnership agreement terms, leading to investigation that revealed the fraudulent sale and systematic violation of family business ownership requirements. Our 15th story comes from a family that discovered their uncle was claiming false medical expenses and caregiving costs to obtain reimbursement from family members and elderly relatives who believed they were supporting legitimate healthcare needs. The uncle had been providing limited caregiving assistance to several elderly family members, but had been systematically inflating his expense reports and creating false documentation about medical costs that supposedly required financial support from other family members. The false medical expense scheme involved creating fake receipts for medical equipment, prescription medications, and healthcare services that were never actually purchased or provided, while claiming that elderly relatives needed financial assistance to cover these fabricated costs. The uncle had been particularly focused on targeting family members who lived far away and couldn't easily verify the claimed medical expenses, relying on their concern for elderly relatives to generate payments for fictitious healthcare needs. The scheme extended to manipulating prescription medication costs and medical appointment information, creating false reports about expensive treatments and medical procedures that supposedly required family financial support but were actually completely fabricated. The uncle had also been intercepting actual medical bills and insurance statements, replacing them with falsified documents that showed higher costs and greater financial need to justify his request for family financial assistance. The false medical expense fraud was discovered when family members began comparing notes about the various financial requests they had received and realized that the total claimed medical expenses were far beyond what would be reasonable for the elderly relative's actual health conditions, leading to investigation of medical records and expense documentation that revealed systematic fraud designed to extract money from concerned family members who believed they were supporting legitimate healthcare needs. Our 16th story involves a mother who was systematically manipulating estate planning documents and will preparation processes to ensure that she would receive a larger inheritance share while reducing distributions to other family members who had legitimate claims to family assets. The mother had been helping her elderly parents with estate planning and legal document preparation, giving her access to will drafts and estate planning discussions that other family members weren't involved in directly. However, instead of providing honest assistance with estate planning, she had been manipulating the document preparation process and influencing her parents' decisions to favor her financial interests over fair distribution to all children and grandchildren. The estate planning manipulation scheme involved providing false information about other family members' financial situations and relationships, convincing her parents that certain relatives didn't deserve inheritance shares or had adequate financial resources that made inheritance unnecessary. The mother had been particularly focused on influencing decisions about property distribution and valuable assets, ensuring that she would receive the most valuable inheritances while other family members received smaller shares or less valuable items. The scheme extended to manipulating her parents' understanding of estate tax implications and legal requirements, providing false information that would justify unequal distribution while claiming that her recommendations were based on professional legal advice. The mother had also been intercepting communications between her parents and their estate planning attorney, ensuring that she could monitor and influence all legal discussions about inheritance distribution and estate management. The estate planning manipulation was discovered when other family members learned about will provisions that contradicted previous family discussions about inheritance distribution, leading to investigation of estate planning records and attorney communications that revealed systematic manipulation designed to increase her inheritance share at the expense of other legitimate family beneficiaries. Our 17th story comes from a family that discovered their brother had been stealing their deceased father's valuable coin collection and numismatic investments that were supposed to be distributed among all children according to specific provisions in their father's will. The brother had been given temporary custody of the coin collection during estate settlement proceedings, with the understanding that the collection would be professionally appraised and distributed based on their father's documented wishes about which children should receive specific coin sets and valuable pieces. However, instead of preserving the collection for proper distribution, the brother had been researching the value of individual coins and systematically removing the most expensive pieces to sell through coin dealers and online auctions, while replacing them with similar-looking but less valuable alternatives. The coin collection theft scheme involved detailed knowledge of numismatic values and marketplace conditions, allowing the brother to identify which coins could be sold for maximum profit while substituting coins that would appear similar to family members who weren't knowledgeable about coin collecting and investment values. The brother had been particularly careful to sell valuable coins through out-of-state dealers and online platforms that would make it difficult for other family members to accidentally discover the missing pieces in local coin shops or auction listings. The scheme extended to manipulating the estate appraisal process and providing false information about the collection's contents and condition, ensuring that missing valuable coins wouldn't be discovered during official valuation procedures that were required for estate settlement. The brother had also been creating false stories about coins being lost or damaged to explain disappearances that might be noticed by family members who had specific knowledge of particular valuable pieces in their father's collection. The coin collection theft was discovered when another family member decided to research the value of coins they were supposed to inherit and realized that several of the most valuable pieces mentioned in their father's collection records were missing from the current inventory, leading to investigation that revealed systematic theft and substitution of valuable numismatic investments that were supposed to be preserved for family distribution. Our 18th story involves a sister-in-law who was systematically emptying her deceased husband's retirement accounts and pension benefits while preventing other family members from learning about the existence or value of these financial assets. The sister-in-law had been married to the family member for only a few years before his unexpected death, but had quickly gained access to his retirement account information and had been liquidating investments and pension benefits that included survivor benefits designated for other family members. The retirement account theft scheme involved manipulating beneficiary information and claiming exclusive rights to all retirement benefits while concealing the existence of accounts that were supposed to provide ongoing financial support for the deceased's children from a previous marriage. The sister-in-law had been working with corrupt financial advisors and account administrators who helped her gain access to retirement funds without proper verification of beneficiary rights and survivor benefit entitlements that should have been distributed to multiple family members. The scheme extended to falsifying financial disclosure documents and estate settlement paperwork, ensuring that other family members wouldn't learn about the existence of substantial retirement assets that were being stolen rather than distributed according to proper inheritance procedures. The sister-in-law had also been creating false stories about financial difficulties and debt obligations that supposedly justified her exclusive access to retirement funds, while actually using the money for luxury purchases and personal investments that had nothing to do with legitimate estate settlement expenses. The retirement account theft was discovered when the deceased's children reached out to his former employer to inquire about possible survivor benefits, and learned that substantial retirement accounts had been liquidated immediately after his death, without their knowledge or involvement, leading to investigation of beneficiary records and account access that revealed systematic theft of retirement benefits that were supposed to be shared among legitimate family beneficiaries. Our 19th story comes from a family that discovered their nephew had been selling their grandfather's classic car and automotive collection without legal authority while claiming that the vehicles needed to be sold to cover medical expenses and estate settlement costs. The nephew had been helping manage their grandfather's property and assets during his final illness, giving him access to vehicle titles and registration information that other family members didn't monitor closely. However, instead of preserving the automotive collection for proper estate distribution, the nephew had been systematically selling valuable vehicles through private sales and classic car dealers while creating false documentation to justify the sales. The unauthorized car sale scheme involved forging their grandfather's signature on vehicle titles and creating fake power of attorney documents that would allow him to legally transfer ownership of classic cars and collectible vehicles that were supposed to be preserved for inheritance distribution. The nephew had been particularly focused on selling the most valuable vehicles first, including rare classic cars and vintage motorcycles that had significant collector value and could generate substantial cash proceeds for personal use. The scheme extended to manipulating vehicle storage and maintenance costs, creating false reports about expensive repair needs and storage fees that supposedly required immediate vehicle sales to prevent further financial losses to the estate. The nephew had also been intercepting correspondence from classic car clubs and collector organizations, preventing other family members from learning about the value and significance of vehicles that were being sold without proper family consultation or legal authorization. The unauthorized vehicle sale operation was discovered when a family member recognized their grandfather's distinctive classic car at a local car show and learned that it had been sold several months earlier, leading to investigation of vehicle registration records and title transfers that revealed systematic theft and unauthorized sale of valuable automotive assets that were supposed to be preserved for family inheritance distribution. Our 20th story involves a cousin who was systematically manipulating their elderly aunt's medication schedule and treatment routine to create confusion and dependency that would allow continued access to her financial resources and valuable personal property. The cousin had volunteered to provide caregiving assistance and medication management after their aunt began experiencing memory problems and difficulty maintaining complex treatment schedules for multiple health conditions. However, instead of providing legitimate care assistance, the cousin had been deliberately creating medication confusion and treatment inconsistencies that would worsen their aunt's cognitive function and increase her dependency on outside help for basic daily activities. The medication manipulation scheme involved providing incorrect dosages, skipping important medications, and even giving medications at wrong times to create health problems and mental confusion that would justify the cousin's continued involvement in financial and personal affairs. The cousin had been particularly focused on accessing their aunt's valuable jewelry collection and financial accounts, using the artificially created dependency to gain power of attorney authority and control over assets that should have remained under their aunt's independent control. The scheme extended to manipulating medical appointment schedules and healthcare provider communications, ensuring that medical professionals wouldn't discover the deliberate medication mismanagement that was causing unnecessary health deterioration and cognitive decline. The cousin had also been isolating their aunt from other family members and friends, claiming that social visits were too stressful for her condition, while actually preventing others from discovering the systematic abuse and financial exploitation that was occurring. The medication manipulation abuse was discovered when a visiting nurse noticed significant inconsistencies in medication management and treatment compliance, leading to medical evaluation that revealed their aunt's health problems were being exacerbated by improper care rather than natural disease progression, ultimately exposing the systematic abuse designed to create dependency and facilitate financial exploitation. Our 21st story comes from a family that discovered their uncle had been stealing valuable farm equipment and agricultural machinery from their deceased brother's property while claiming that the equipment needed to be sold to pay estate debts and property maintenance costs. The uncle had been helping manage the family farm during estate settlement proceedings, giving him access to expensive tractors, harvesting equipment, and specialized agricultural machinery that represented significant value and were supposed to be preserved for inheritance distribution among farming family members. However, instead of preserving the agricultural equipment for proper estate distribution, the uncle had been systematically selling valuable machinery through farm equipment dealers and online agricultural marketplaces while creating false documentation about equipment failures and disposal needs. The farm equipment theft scheme involved researching the value of individual machines and systematically removing the most expensive items first, including modern tractors and specialized harvesting equipment that had substantial resale value in agricultural markets. The uncle had been particularly careful to sell equipment through out-of-state dealers and auction houses that would make it difficult for other family members to accidentally discover the missing machinery at local farm equipment sales or agricultural auctions. The scheme extended to manipulating farm operation records and equipment maintenance documentation, creating false reports about machinery breakdowns and repair costs that supposedly justified disposal of functional equipment that was actually being sold for personal profit. The uncle had also been intercepting correspondence from equipment manufacturers and warranty providers, preventing other family members from learning about the actual condition and value of machinery that was being stolen rather than legitimately disposed of due to operational needs. The equipment theft operation was discovered when family members decided to conduct a comprehensive inventory of farm assets and realized that several expensive machines mentioned in their brother's insurance records were missing from the current equipment roster, leading to investigation of sales records and equipment tracking that revealed systematic theft of valuable agricultural machinery that was supposed to be preserved for family farming operations. Our 22nd story involves a stepmother who was systematically hiding financial accounts and investment portfolios that belonged to her deceased husband, while allowing his children to believe that the estate had limited assets available for inheritance distribution. The stepmother had been married to their father for only a short period before his death, but had quickly gained access to his financial information and had been concealing the existence of substantial bank accounts, investment portfolios, and even overseas financial assets that were supposed to be disclosed during estate settlement proceedings. The hidden financial account scheme involved transferring money from discoverable accounts into new accounts that were opened in her name only, making it appear that the estate had fewer assets than actually existed while preserving substantial wealth for her exclusive benefit. The stepmother had been working with corrupt financial advisors and estate planning professionals who helped her move assets and create complex financial structures that would hide wealth from estate discovery and inheritance distribution requirements. The scheme extended to falsifying financial disclosure documents and estate inventory reports, ensuring that hidden assets wouldn't be discovered during routine estate settlement procedures that were required to identify all property and investments for proper inheritance distribution. The stepmother had also been manipulating debt reporting and estate expense claims, creating false financial obligations that would reduce the apparent estate value, while actually preserving hidden assets for her personal benefit after estate settlement was completed. The hidden asset operation was discovered when the children hired an independent estate attorney who conducted a thorough investigation of their father's financial history and discovered evidence of substantial assets that had been concealed from estate proceedings, leading to legal action to recover hidden wealth that was supposed to be distributed among all legitimate estate beneficiaries. Our 23rd story comes from a family that discovered their sister had been forging their grandmother's will documents and creating false legal paperwork to increase her inheritance share while reducing distributions to other grandchildren who had maintained closer relationships with their grandmother throughout her life. The sister had been helping their grandmother with legal document organization and estate planning paperwork, giving her access to will drafts and legal correspondence that other family members weren't involved in directly. However, instead of providing honest assistance with estate planning, the sister had been creating false will documents and forging their grandmother's signature on legal paperwork that would dramatically change inheritance distribution in her favor. The will forgery scheme involved sophisticated document creation techniques and legal formatting that would make fraudulent will documents appear legitimate to casual inspection, while actually representing completely false estate planning intentions that contradicted their grandmother's actual wishes. The sister had been particularly focused on increasing her inheritance of valuable property and financial assets, while reducing distributions to grandchildren who were supposed to receive significant inheritances based on their grandmother's documented affection and ongoing relationships. The scheme extended to destroying authentic will documents and replacing them with forged alternatives, ensuring that estate settlement would proceed based on fraudulent legal documentation rather than their grandmother's actual final wishes. The sister had also been manipulating witness signatures and notarization requirements, creating false verification documentation that would make forged will documents appear to meet all legal requirements for validity and enforceability. The will forgery operation was discovered when the family attorney noticed significant inconsistencies between the will language and their grandmother's previous legal discussions about inheritance preferences, leading to handwriting analysis and legal document verification that revealed systematic forgery designed to steal inheritance rights from legitimate beneficiaries. Our 24th story involves a brother-in-law who was secretly selling inherited property and real estate assets while concealing the sales from other family members who held joint ownership interests in the properties. The brother-in-law had been designated as the property manager for several rental properties and vacation homes that were jointly inherited by multiple family members, with the understanding that he would handle maintenance and rental management while preserving the properties for shared family benefit. However, instead of managing the properties as intended, the brother-in-law had been working with corrupt real estate agents and legal document preparers to sell properties without obtaining required consent from other joint owners. The secret property sale scheme involved forging signatures from joint owners and creating false power of attorney documents that would allow him to complete real estate transactions without legitimate authorization from family members who held ownership interests. The brother-in-law had been particularly focused on selling properties in markets where rapid appreciation had created substantial equity values that could generate significant profits for personal use rather than shared family benefit. The scheme extended to manipulating property tax records and maintenance documentation, creating false reports about property problems and expenses that would justify disposal while actually preparing properties for profitable sales. The brother-in-law had also been intercepting real estate correspondence and property management communications, preventing other family members from learning about property market values and sale opportunities that were being exploited for personal profit. The secret property sale operation was discovered when family members received unexpected tax documentation related to property sales they knew nothing about, leading to investigation of real estate records and transaction documentation that revealed systematic theft of jointly owned property through fraudulent sales and forged authorization documents. Our 25th story comes from a family that discovered their daughter had been systematically manipulating her elderly parents' credit card accounts and financial access to fund personal purchases and debt payments that had nothing to do with her parents' care or living expenses. The daughter had volunteered to help manage her parents' daily financial transactions and bill payment responsibilities after noticing that her parent was having difficulty keeping track of credit card statements and payment due dates. However, instead of providing legitimate financial assistance, the daughter had been using her parents' credit cards for personal shopping and had been making minimum payments to keep accounts current while allowing debt balances to grow substantially. The credit card manipulation scheme involved memorizing her parents' account information and making unauthorized purchases while creating believable explanations for increased spending that supposedly related to her parents' care needs and living expenses. The daughter had been particularly careful to make purchases at stores and for services that could plausibly be related to elderly care, including medical supplies, household items, and services that her parent might legitimately need, making it difficult to identify fraudulent transactions without detailed investigation. The scheme extended to manipulating her parents' understanding of credit card balances and payment amounts, providing false information about account status and financial obligations to prevent discovery of unauthorized spending and debt accumulation. The daughter had also been intercepting credit card statements and financial correspondence, replacing them with falsified documents that showed lower balances and smaller payment amounts to conceal the extent of unauthorized credit card usage. The credit card fraud was discovered when her parents' bank contacted them directly about concerning account activity and credit utilization that seemed inconsistent with their normal spending patterns, leading to investigation of transaction records that revealed systematic unauthorized use of credit accounts for personal purchases that had nothing to do with legitimate care expenses. Our 26th story involves an uncle who was systematically stealing their deceased brother's valuable tool collection and workshop equipment while claiming that the items needed to be disposed of due to storage costs and estate settlement requirements. The uncle had been helping clean out his brother's workshop and garage after his death, giving him access to expensive power tools, precision instruments, and specialized equipment that represented substantial value, and were supposed to be distributed among family members who could use the tools professionally or personally. However, instead of preserving the tool collection for proper inheritance distribution, the uncle had been systematically removing valuable items and selling them through tool dealers and online marketplaces while creating false stories about tools being damaged or outdated. The tool collection theft scheme involved researching the value of individual tools and systematically removing the most expensive items first, including professional-grade equipment and rare vintage tools that had significant collector value in addition to their practical utility. The uncle had been particularly careful to sell tools through out-of-state dealers and online platforms that would make it difficult for other family members to accidentally discover missing items at local tool shops or equipment auctions. The scheme extended to manipulating estate inventory records and property valuation reports, ensuring that missing tools wouldn't be discovered during official estate appraisal procedures that were required for inheritance distribution. The uncle had also been creating false maintenance and storage cost reports, claiming that workshop cleanup and tool preservation was becoming too expensive for the estate to maintain while actually profiting from systematic theft of valuable equipment. The tool collection theft was discovered when family members decided to divide the workshop equipment and realized that many expensive tools they remembered from their brother's collection were missing from the current inventory, leading to investigation of sales records and equipment tracking that revealed systematic theft of valuable tools that were supposed to be preserved for family distribution. Our 27th story comes from a family that discovered their cousin had been claiming false caregiving expenses and fabricating costs for elderly relative care while actually providing minimal assistance and pocketing money that was supposed to support legitimate care needs. The cousin had volunteered to provide caregiving services for their elderly aunt who needed assistance with daily activities and medication management, with the understanding that family members would contribute financially to cover legitimate care expenses and support services. However, instead of providing the comprehensive care that was being paid for, the cousin had been creating elaborate false expense reports and claiming reimbursement for services that were never actually provided. The false caregiving expense scheme involved submitting fake receipts for medical supplies, transportation costs, and care services while actually spending minimal time providing actual assistance to their elderly relative. The cousin had been particularly focused on claiming expenses for specialized care services and medical equipment that appeared legitimate but were actually completely fabricated to generate maximum reimbursement from concerned family members. The scheme extended to manipulating the elderly relative's schedule and care needs, creating false reports about medical appointments and treatment requirements that would justify ongoing expense claims for services that were never actually arranged or provided. The cousin had also been intercepting communications between the elderly relative and other family members, preventing discovery of the inadequate care that was being provided despite substantial family financial contributions for comprehensive caregiving services. The false caregiving expense fraud was discovered when family members decided to visit their elderly relative unexpectedly and realized that the care situation was completely different from what had been described in expense reports, leading to investigation of caregiving documentation and expense claims that revealed systematic fraud designed to extract money while providing minimal actual assistance to the family member who needed legitimate care support. Our 28th story involves a sister who was systematically selling family photographs, memorabilia, and sentimental items that held significant emotional value for other family members while claiming that the items had no monetary worth and were taking up too much storage space. The sister had been designated as the keeper of family historical items after their parents' deaths, including photograph collections, personal letters, and memorabilia that represented decades of family history and held immense sentimental value for siblings and extended family members. However, instead of preserving these items for family sharing and historical preservation, the sister had been researching the collector value of vintage photographs and family memorabilia and systematically selling items that had market value while discarding others. The memorabilia selling scheme involved identifying items that had value to collectors of vintage photography, historical documents, and family memorabilia, while convincing other family members that these items were worthless clutter that needed to be disposed of for practical reasons. The sister had been particularly focused on selling items through online auction platforms and collector markets where family photographs and personal documents could generate surprising amounts of money from buyers interested in vintage imagery and historical documentation. The scheme extended to manipulating family discussions about memorabilia disposition, claiming that storage costs and practical considerations required disposing of items, while actually profiting from sales of family history that other relatives would have wanted to preserve. The sister had also been creating false stories about items being damaged or lost to explain disappearances that might be noticed by family members who had specific memories of particular photographs or memorabilia pieces. The family memorabilia theft was discovered when a family member happened to see their parents' wedding photographs in an online auction listing, leading to investigation of recent sales and family historical item disposition that revealed systematic theft and sale of irreplaceable family history that was supposed to be preserved for future generations. Our 29th story comes from a family that discovered their brother had been forging power of attorney documents and legal authorization paperwork to gain unauthorized access to elderly relatives' financial accounts and property management responsibilities. The brother had been volunteering to help elderly family members with various administrative tasks and legal paperwork, giving him access to personal information and legal documents that he used to create fraudulent power of attorney authorizations. The power of attorney forgery scheme involved creating sophisticated legal documentation that appeared legitimate and would allow him to make financial decisions and property transactions on behalf of elderly relatives who had never actually granted such authority. The brother had been particularly focused on gaining access to bank accounts, investment portfolios, and real estate holdings that could be manipulated for personal benefit while appearing to provide legitimate assistance with financial management for relatives who were experiencing difficulty with complex financial tasks. The scheme extended to working with corrupt notary publics and legal document services that would provide official stamps and verification on forged documents, making fraudulent power of attorney authorizations appear completely legitimate to financial institutions and property management companies. The brother had also been manipulating elderly relatives' understanding of legal documents they were signing, convincing them that routine paperwork was being completed when they were actually signing blank forms that could be completed later with fraudulent authorization language. The power of attorney forgery operation was discovered when one of the elderly relatives attempted to make a financial transaction and learned that their nephew had been making unauthorized account changes and financial decisions based on power of attorney documents they had never actually signed, leading to legal investigation that revealed systematic forgery of legal authorization documents designed to facilitate financial theft and property manipulation. Our 30th story involves a mother-in-law who was systematically stealing money from grandchildren's college fund accounts and educational savings programs that had been established by their deceased parents to ensure future educational opportunities. The mother-in-law had been granted access to these accounts to help manage educational savings and ensure that funds were properly maintained for the children's future college expenses, but had been systematically withdrawing money for personal use while creating false documentation about educational expenses and account management costs. The college fund theft scheme involved making regular withdrawals from educational savings accounts while creating fake expense reports that claimed the money was being used for educational materials, tutoring services, and other child-related expenses that appeared legitimate but were actually fabricated. The mother-in-law had been particularly careful to withdraw amounts that wouldn't immediately trigger account alerts or minimum balance problems, systematically draining funds over extended periods while maintaining the appearance that accounts were being properly managed for their intended educational purposes. The scheme extended to manipulating account statements and investment reports, providing false information to the children's guardians about account performance and balance levels to prevent discovery of unauthorized withdrawals and fund depletion. The mother-in-law had also been intercepting correspondence from financial institutions and educational savings program administrators, ensuring that account activity reports and balance notifications wouldn't reveal the systematic theft of funds that were designated for the children's future educational needs. The college fund theft was discovered when the children reached ages where college planning became necessary and their guardians attempted to access educational savings accounts, only to learn that funds that were supposed to support college expenses had been depleted through unauthorized withdrawals that were documented with false educational expense claims. Our 31st story comes from a family that discovered their nephew had been manipulating their grandfather's prescription medication refill schedules and pharmacy management to obtain extra medications that could be sold for profit while potentially endangering his grandfather's health and treatment compliance. The nephew had volunteered to help manage his grandfather's complex medication routine and pharmacy coordination after his grandfather began having difficulty keeping track of multiple prescriptions and refill schedules for various chronic health conditions. However, instead of providing legitimate medication management assistance, the nephew had been requesting early refills and duplicate prescriptions while convincing his grandfather that changes in medication schedules were medically necessary. The prescription refill manipulation scheme involved contacting multiple pharmacies and using different insurance information to obtain additional quantities of valuable medications while maintaining his grandfather's regular prescription schedule to avoid immediate detection of the duplicate medication acquisition. The nephew had been particularly focused on obtaining pain medications and other controlled substances that had high street value and could be sold to illegal drug dealers for substantial profits, while potentially leaving his grandfather with inadequate medication supplies for legitimate medical treatment. The scheme extended to manipulating his grandfather's understanding of medication dosages and treatment schedules, providing false information about prescription changes and medical requirements to justify altered medication management that actually served the nephew's profit motives rather than his grandfather's health needs. The nephew had also been intercepting communications from doctors and pharmacists about medication compliance and prescription management, preventing medical professionals from discovering the manipulation of prescribed treatment regimens. The prescription manipulation fraud was discovered when his grandfather's health began deteriorating despite supposedly taking all prescribed medications correctly, leading to medical evaluation that revealed medication levels were inconsistent with prescribed dosages, ultimately exposing the systematic theft of essential medications that were being sold for profit while potentially endangering an elderly family member's health and medical treatment. Our 32nd story involves a sister-in-law who was systematically claiming her deceased husband's veteran benefits and military compensation while preventing other family members from learning about the existence of survivor benefits and family support programs that were available to multiple beneficiaries. The sister-in-law had been married to the military veteran for only a short period before his death, but had quickly contacted veteran administration offices and claimed exclusive rights to all veteran benefits and survivor compensation programs. However, investigation revealed that several veteran benefit programs included provisions for multiple family beneficiaries, including children from previous marriages and dependent parents who were entitled to survivor benefits and ongoing support payments. The veteran benefits fraud scheme involved providing false information to veteran administration officials about family composition and survivor eligibility, claiming that she was the only legitimate beneficiary while concealing the existence of other family members who had legal rights to veteran benefits and compensation programs. The sister-in-law had been working with corrupt veteran service representatives who helped her navigate benefit application processes while avoiding proper verification of family eligibility and survivor benefit distribution requirements that should have included multiple family members. The scheme extended to intercepting veteran administration correspondence and benefit notifications, preventing other family members from learning about available benefits and survivor support programs that they were legally entitled to receive based on their relationships with the deceased veteran. The sister-in-law had also been creating false documentation about family relationships and dependency status, providing fraudulent information that would support her exclusive benefit claims while denying legitimate benefits to other family members who qualified for veteran survivor support. The veteran benefits fraud was discovered when the deceased veteran's children from a previous marriage contacted veteran administration offices independently to inquire about possible survivor benefits and learned that comprehensive benefits had been claimed exclusively by their stepmother, leading to investigation of benefit eligibility and family verification that revealed systematic fraud designed to steal veteran benefits from legitimate family beneficiaries. Our 33rd story comes from a family that discovered their uncle had been systematically selling their deceased relatives' antique furniture collection and valuable household items while claiming that the items needed to be disposed of due to estate settlement, costs, and storage expenses. The uncle had been helping manage estate property and household contents after his brother's death, giving him access to valuable antique furniture, artwork, and collectible household items that were supposed to be preserved for distribution among family members according to inheritance provisions. However, instead of preserving the household items for proper estate distribution, the uncle had been researching the value of antique pieces and systematically selling the most valuable items through antique dealers and auction houses while creating false documentation about disposal needs and storage costs. The antique furniture theft scheme involved identifying pieces that had significant collector value and removing them from the estate inventory while replacing them with less valuable furniture that would appear similar to family members who weren't knowledgeable about antique furniture values and authentication. The uncle had been particularly careful to sell valuable pieces through out-of-state dealers and auction platforms that would make it difficult for other family members to accidentally discover missing antiques at local shops or estate sales in their area. The scheme extended to manipulating estate inventory records and property valuation reports, ensuring that missing valuable furniture wouldn't be discovered during official estate appraisal procedures that were required for inheritance distribution and tax reporting. The uncle had also been creating false maintenance and storage cost reports, claiming that preserving antique furniture was becoming too expensive for the estate while actually profiting from systematic theft of valuable household items. The antique furniture theft was discovered when family members decided to distribute household items and realized that several valuable antique pieces they remembered from their relative's home were missing from the current estate inventory, leading to investigation of sales records and furniture disposition that revealed systematic theft of valuable antiques that were supposed to be preserved for family inheritance distribution. Our 34th story involves a stepfather who was systematically manipulating his elderly wife's Social Security payments and government benefit programs while creating false documentation about his role as a caregiver and financial manager. The stepfather had convinced his elderly wife that consolidating her government benefits and financial management would simplify her administrative responsibilities and reduce confusion about multiple payment sources and account management requirements. However, instead of providing legitimate financial assistance, the stepfather had been redirecting her Social Security and pension payments into accounts he controlled while providing her with minimal support for daily living expenses and medical needs. The Social Security manipulation scheme involved submitting false change forms and financial information to government agencies, making it appear that his wife had requested benefit management changes while she was actually unaware that her payments were being systematically stolen. The stepfather had been working with corrupt financial advisors and benefit specialists who helped him gain access to government benefit systems without proper verification of authorization and caregiver credentials that should have been required for financial management responsibilities. The scheme extended to creating false caregiving expense reports and medical cost documentation, claiming reimbursement for services and expenses that were never actually provided while using stolen benefit money for personal purchases and debt payments. The stepfather had also been manipulating his wife's understanding of her financial situation and government benefit entitlements, providing false information about benefit amounts and government policy changes to prevent her from discovering that her payments were being stolen rather than properly managed. The government benefit theft was discovered when a social worker conducting routine benefit verification noticed inconsistencies between reported benefit amounts and the elderly woman's apparent financial resources, leading to investigation of benefit payment records and account management that revealed systematic theft of government payments that were supposed to support the elderly woman's care and living expenses. Our final story comes from a family that discovered their daughter had been systematically stealing her deceased mother's vintage clothing collection and designer accessories while claiming that the items had no value and were outdated fashion pieces that nobody would want to preserve. The daughter had been designated as the person responsible for managing her mother's personal belongings and clothing after her death, with the understanding that valuable items would be preserved for family distribution while outdated or worn clothing would be donated to charity organizations. However, instead of properly evaluating and preserving valuable items, the daughter had been researching the collector value of vintage designer clothing and accessories and systematically selling pieces that had significant market value in vintage fashion and collector markets. The vintage clothing theft scheme involved identifying designer pieces and rare vintage items that had substantial value to fashion collectors, while convincing other family members that all clothing items were worthless, outdated garments that needed to be disposed of for practical reasons. The daughter had been particularly focused on selling items through online vintage fashion platforms and specialty collectors where designer clothing and accessories from previous decades could generate substantial profits from buyers interested in authentic vintage fashion pieces. The scheme extended to manipulating family discussions about personal property disposition, claiming that storage costs and practical considerations required disposing of clothing while actually profiting from sales of valuable fashion items that other family members might have wanted to preserve for sentimental reasons or their own use. The daughter had also been creating false stories about items being damaged or inappropriate for preservation to explain disappearances that might be noticed by family members who had specific memories of their mother's designer clothing and accessories. The vintage clothing theft was discovered when a family member recognized their mother's distinctive designer handbag in an online vintage fashion auction, leading to investigation of recent clothing disposition and sales that revealed systematic theft and sale of valuable vintage fashion items that were supposed to be evaluated for family distribution rather than secretly sold for personal profit. That concludes tonight's collection of 35 stories about family members who let greed destroy the bonds of trust and love that should define family relationships. These situations remind us that inheritance and money can bring out both the best and worst in people, and that protecting vulnerable family members requires vigilance and sometimes difficult conversations about ethics and responsibility. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you tomorrow night with more fascinating tales from Reddit.